Today, we're diving into a story that really sits on the edge of what we think is possible. A story about math, but also about imagination. It's about a concept so basic, so fundamental, we never, ever think to question it.
And I want you to really think about that for a second. I don't mean, a font deletes from your computer. I mean, what if the idea of a number just wasn't there anymore? What if it just stopped working? That is the incredible, kind of terrifying idea we're going to explore. So let me introduce you to Vera Kaslan. She's a brilliant mathematician, and she's working on this super complex problem called the Zilani conjecture. It's basically all about the shape of nothingness. And she gets to this critical point in her proof. She goes to write the number 0, and nothing. The pen moves, but the page is blank. She tries on her computer, hits the key, and just an empty space appears. So what was going on here? This wasn't just some weird glitch in her office. This was the start of a massive conceptual breakdown. A number was literally vanishing. Vera and her colleague Yusuf, they immediately checked all the usual suspects. Is it a font issue, a software bug? But no. They realized pretty quickly that this was something way, way deeper. The problem wasn't with a symbol, it was with the very idea of 0. The meaning itself was somehow gone. And the rules of this disappearing act were just bizarre. For example, if you wrote a 0 as part of a phone number, it was fine. But a 0 that you actually needed for math problem, poof, gone. It didn't matter what you used, pen, keyboard. One physicist apparently tried to draw it in the sand out in the desert, and the wind just smoothed it over. This was the critical clue. Whatever was happening could tell the difference between 0 the shape and 0 the function. Okay, so this brings us to the next, much scarier part of this whole thing. Once Vera understood the concept itself was broken, she had to ask a really simple, really terrifying question. Just how much of our world actually needs 0 to work?
Well, the answer, it turns out, is almost everything. I mean, think about it. Without 0 to hold a place, our entire number system falls apart. The number 302 suddenly looks exactly like 32. Algebra? You can't solve an equation if you can't ask when it equals 0. Calculus, which is all about getting infinitely close to 0, becomes total nonsense, and it just cascades from there. Quantum physics, the entire global economy, even the core of logic itself, they all lean on 0.
This really gets to the heart of it, right? 0 isn't just one number among many. It's the silent partner, the invisible foundation for the whole building. It's the nothing that gives everything else its value and its place. And that foundation had just vanished. This was a huge turning point for Vera. She realized she was asking the wrong question. It wasn't what was happening, it was why. And this is where the story gets really, really strange. This was her mind-bending leap of faith. The fact that 0 knew when it was being used for math, well, that implied some kind of awareness. So Vera came up with this radical hypothesis. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. It was an action. The concept of 0 was, for all intents and purposes, on strike.
Now, to explain this, she actually developed a whole new theory she called conceptual weight. The idea is that any concept carries a weight based on 3 things. First, frequency, how often we use it. Second, diversity, how many different jobs it does. And third, load, how much other stuff depends on it. And when you look at 0, it maxes out all 3 categories. It's been carrying this incredible weight for something like 1,400 years.
And this is the beautiful, almost heartbreaking core of her theory. For centuries, 0 has been doing all this enormous, invisible, foundational work, and nobody ever noticed. It was never acknowledged. The weight became unbearable because the work itself was completely taken for granted. So, if a number can go on strike, where does it go? Vera figured the only way to find out was to follow it, to go into the strange conceptual space at the very edge of mathematics. She started picturing 0, not as a dot on a number line, but as a kind of coastline. This complex fractal boundary between what is and what isn't. It's the line that makes both sides possible. And using her work on that Zilani conjecture, she basically figured out how to build a formal mathematical doorway to cross that line. You see the huge shift in thinking here, right? The rest of the world was treating this like an unfixable bug, a technical problem that needed a patch. But Vera understood it was a foundational concept that was collapsing under an unbearable weight. The problem didn't need to be fixed, it needed to be heard.
And when she stepped through that mathematical door into this place she called the null-interior, she found a world where absences were real things, like objects. She saw the true, stunningly beautiful geometry that her life's work had only guessed at. And then she found zero. But it wasn't some giant, powerful god. It was something small and quiet and just completely exhausted from the strain of being so necessary but so unseen.
So what happened next wasn't a repair job. It wasn't a fix. It was a negotiation. And that negotiation created an entirely new field of mathematics. The deal was this. Zero didn't want a parade or, a thank you note from the public. It wanted its work to be recognized by the people who built the system in the first place, the mathematicians. It agreed to come back, but only if they promised to create a new field of study designed to make its invisible labor finally visible inside their equations. And the result was just incredible. Vera's first act was to finally prove the Cittellini conjecture, putting on paper the very architecture that zero holds up. This led to a whole new vocabulary, with terms like the weight lattice, which is the structure of absences, and my favorite, the beautifully poetic term zero loneliness, which is now a formal property defined as being absolutely necessary but structurally invisible. But Vera's biggest insight, the ultimate takeaway, was even broader. She said the point wasn't that zero was somehow special or unique. The point was that our world is full of these invisible, load-bearing structures that we depend on every single day without ever seeing them. The lesson of zero is that we just haven't been looking.
And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. After hearing a story like this, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own lives, in our jobs, in our families, in the technology we use every day, what's the invisible work that's holding it all together? What's the unacknowledged, silent partner that makes your world possible? What holds you up?